Hi, sorry, jumped in.
Well, I'm certainly interested in data rules. So this is a question about, you prioritized your sources, and I'm wondering, can you use data rules to prioritize the sources? Or you just ask the business which source they like the best, or is there a way to evaluate your sources?
So actually at the implementation level, the screenshot you saw may look really simple, but there are rules that are actually driven behind the source, so yeah, you can set those rules. I don't know how complex you'd want to get. At that level, there's a point where you really want to pull it back into the mapping layer, the logic layer, versus just saying once it lands, this source, this attributes can be more valuable. But there are ways to influence that, yes.
And could you perhaps use data rules on an ongoing way to continue to evaluate the sources of the quality of what you're getting from these?
Yeah, so there's actually 3 different types of rules in the system. The first is the loader type, which is actually implemented when the data is being loaded. The second is sort of a user interface driven rule, so as people are entering data in manually, they'll get prompted for situations where the data exceeds some prefet rule. And the third is called a check rule, which you can set up nightly runs to go out and check the population of the data and make sure that it's still adhering to the rules that you set in place. And these can share between each other. So yes, to your point, there is a constant evaluation and evergreen check state that can go back and make sure that the data that's there is still meeting the rules that have been set up by the organization.
Alan, thank you. That was a great presentation, Mark. Thanks so much. Just a question on the bidirectional aspect of what you're talking about. Are you actually taking now your gold standard and writing it back to those source systems so that you're changing the UWI within those systems that are being created by the end users?
So we're certainly keeping their key. If they have a need to, we would rather than pass us something that we've already said, this is the same thing. If we can get them to pass us that, we don't have to worry about matching anymore. It's all done. And they've actually got interoperability, if needed, between systems. So we'd love it if they would find a place for this UWI back in their system. We can't force them to do it, but certainly a governance team would help propose that that's a good idea.
Well status is typically set by the local regulators, so how did you address that when you went down to 17?
So in that situation, we actually met with the Apache business units, and they were the ones that really helped define that. I'm not sure I fully heard your question.
So basically, local regulators set what statuses you should use for submittals. So how do you stay compliant with the local regulator if you went down to a standard 17 versus using what the regulators say you should use in that particular area?
So we should have highlighted this a little bit more. These statuses weren't for regulatory reporting purposes, they were for analytics purposes. They have a series of dashboards that is used by the executive team where they classify the 17 statuses they want to use in making decisions at a high level versus those that are actually reported to the regulatory agencies. So in the solution, we capture the original status, which came from necessary source, as well as the alias status. And we present one or the other depending upon the use case for how people want to consume the data, sometimes both.
I'm just curious, Mark, if I know it was looking at data, you could perhaps theoretically go through a cross-check and find wells that were producing but weren't, operated by another party, and yet, the state systems, but weren't coincidentally in your financial systems because you weren't getting a check from your other parties and perhaps sending a note about this, or focus in some other way of actually finding the value. My question is, at the end of this project, did you go back to management and say, here was the cost, and here's the value number of things we found so far, and the value number exceeds the cost? Without saying how you did it.
Will the governance team be tasked with finding those, talking to the business, knowing that they're going to be part of the business? They're going to want to know, hey, we've got this data, let's figure out what value we can get from confirming or denying whatever that is. And then we've got all the data in one place to be able to quickly find that answer, at least do more research. Is that it? That answer? Sort of? We can talk afterwards.
Yeah.
So Mark, I have a two-pronged question, and great lecture, by the way. So upon creation of this master well number, can you address what was the event, or was there a consistent event which identified when that well came into your system to get that unique identifier? And then furthermore, after that, how did you address potential duplicates? So when you're doing your matching algorithm, how did you, obviously there's kind of a threshold in and outside of that, so how did you address kind of what to do with something that looked like a duplicate?
So to answer your first question regarding the events that triggered the data movement, in the beginning it was loading everything that existed in the source system. We really went out, we filtered by the region, and pulled everything over. Then in phase 2, we introduced change data capture. So the way we did it wasn't your typical change data capture system, because typically you would look at last change date. Not every system has a last change date. So what we did there is we have the ability to look at the historical loads from the day before. So we would stage the data that we think should have changed, compare it against what did change, look at whether or not that job ran successfully. Did that well pass all the rules? And if it didn't, we wouldn't load it again. If it did, we would actually load it, because it registered as an actual change. Now, in terms of the duplicates, you really can't catch every situation. And so there's a pretty detailed error system that whenever that situation happens where we can't resolve a unique well, or a version, whether or not we should create a new version because it's the first time that particular well hit on that version record from that source, or if it was a duplicate, we found more than one match, we would kick it out, and there's a reporting system that actually reports on that. There's a Spotfire dashboard that can show those. We didn't show a lot of that today, but yeah, we had to rush through, so there's a lot more detail that you feel free to find us afterward. There's another question?
We got one more in the back.
Yeah, just a couple of questions on the technical implementation. When you talked about doing the matching on the name and even where is that matching happening, and what technology did you use for the integration? Are you doing that in the integration layer? Is the generic loader capable of doing that matching?
So, little secret sauce here, Oracle has built-in functions that do jar link or string matching. So we use those in our stored procedures for finding the match. So we would run that against the database and say, give me all matches that exceed a 90% threshold based upon the string logic built in. It's fuzzy matching with a more fancy name. So the Oracle provided that capability out of the box.
Okay, and if you don't mind, if you don't mind sharing, what technology you're using for the integration layer?
So that is it's actually AutoSys at the core, and it's a series of Perl scripts, over 70 Perl scripts that manage each of the stage of the ETL process. And so those would query or read XML files depending upon the source data, stage that into the staging tables, and then from there that would get migrated via the loader tool for the product into the actual
Yes, it's not like an enterprise system like Informatica or...
So AutoSys is an enterprise commercial solution. The Perl scripts were custom built in-house.
Okay.
So it's a combination. It's like an Informatica where you have a commercial platform, but the development on top was custom.
Can you join me in thanking